is Mandy with Soulfully Soil. Bobbi of Goddess Inc. and I have been birthing, I suppose birthing's not the right word, but gestating this 2-part, 5-week session, conversation, experience, invocation to the conversation or the intention of the magical, sensual, spiritual beings that we are. And we have had little snippets of conversation in some of our gatherings and our time together and our times apart in the last several weeks and months that have left us at this sort of same cornerstone of unlimited love and connection and deep desire, and sort of how that plays out in our physical worlds, how that plays out as mothers, how that plays out as partners, as friends, as women in community, as visionaries, as edge workers, as healers, as all the roles and responsibilities that we are or dance with from time to time. And there is a common thread about this like spiritual, magical, sensual, sexual being. And some of the conversations have left us with the awareness. I'll speak for myself. I can't speak for Bobbi. But some of the conversations have left me with this sense of there's an incomplete story that's been told or dictated or scripted to women specifically. Probably, likely, all humans, but women in particular. And the storyline is about our sexuality. It's about our power. It's about our prowess. It's about our allowed tos. It's about what we should be doing. It's about what's expected from a woman. It's about women's duties and responsibilities in relation to men, and in partnership and in marriage and in motherhood. And it's a very narrow view. What I've come to realize in my experience with gathering with women and in my own world is that there is an expectation of, servitude and being in service to others before self. And that my body, my physicalness, my weight, my skin complexion, the type of hair I grow on my head, whether or not I shave, all is dictated by a very patriarchal storyline that was created not by me and not by my ancestors, but has been what I believe has been upheld by my mother and my grandmother and my grandmother's mother. And it isn't necessarily meaningful for me. Probably never was, but I just didn't realize that this storyline about what I can and can't do and will and won't do and should and shouldn't do was woven for me. It was a pathway, a journey laid out, and it was never ever directly addressed. It was always tiptoed around and innuendoed, and through the lens of criticism or snide comments pointed out to me certain ways of being were not acceptable. So when I was a little girl and I was moving my body through my world, it was very much made clear to me that if I moved in certain ways or I wore certain outfits, that I would be responsible for leading a man on. And the irony of that is I was sexually abused a number of times in my childhood, and even though the attempts to keep me from just being myself were made, it didn't do any different in the long run in the sense of the violation to my device. And I see this, and I believed in this for a very, very long time. Watch children, watch little kids. They put their hands in their mouths and they suck on them and they lick their arms and their elbows and their knees and whatever else they can get a hold of. They eat with this beautiful mindfulness of yummy luxuriousness, and they snap their tongues, and they really have this, they dance when they feel the mood. They just bust out and they start dancing. They bust out and they start singing. There's no filter for them when they're young about what they do with their bodies. Their essence just moves their bodies, and sometimes it moves their bodies in a way that could be perceived as sensual. But what I've realized is it isn't it isn't articulated as a sensuality, as a full senses experience. It is perceived as a sexual one. So whether young boys touch their penis, or pick at their groin, or take their pants down, or pick at their bum, or all the other things I've seen children do, and I'm sure did myself, it's viewed through the lens of something that's wrong and yucky and gross and not well-mannered, and that's for you, that's shameful, do that in your bedroom, don't do that here. And as a parenting structure, or as a parenting institution, or a force of parenting, we shut it down immediately. And in that, our children lose this ability to touch their own bodies and own their own bodies and follow their own internal cues as to where and when and how and why and with who they want to move their bodies. And so it's been hypersexualized. And I don't need to explain to all of you what goes on in the media, our addiction to pornography, and our very closeted views around sexuality, especially when we add this temperament or this experience or this belief called religion. Regardless of what the religion is, there is very, very staunch rules about what a person can and cannot do with their body or with their eyes or any of those things. We have child pornography being distributed at an all-time high in humanity, which is atrocious to some people, yet I would say it's atrocious to most of us in public. Yet we have a very, very large a large portion of, or percentile of, our community members that are looking at and distributing and creating child pornography. It's our doctors and our lawyers and our police officers and our teachers and our counselors and our mums and our dads and our grandpas and our grandmas. And I would argue that there's a higher male population attached to them. And so I don't say that so much as a judgment as it is an observation. In this hypersexualized atmosphere, our bodies become the focus of how we achieve pleasure. And yes, we do achieve pleasure using our bodies because we have senses. We have our 5 senses, and I believe that we have more, we just don't remember. And what I'm saying in this conversation, when we add the magical, spiritual, sensual piece to it, is that we are beings of energy. We came here to live in this skin for a reason. And the sexual skin-on-skin, penis-in-vagina way of looking at our lives, or how we express, is a very, very small and limited view. And then as we age, when that body, or those body parts, or those body systems start to fail, which they do, we don't have as much lubrication or sexual desire or testosterone or all of these things that provide those sexual urges to us. When they start to diminish, then we don't know what to do with ourselves. And we start to medicate. We start to medicate so that we can continue having intercourse, even though our biology is slowing down in that. We're left with, now what? We're left with a crisis of identity, of how do I relate to another in relationship when I can't spread my legs or poke them. And I use that language quite harshly, intentionally, because I think we somehow romanticize the physical pieces of it. And don't get me wrong, I think that a physical engagement with from one person to another in the form of intercourse or oral sex can be the most heightened, kind, loving, deeply connected experience. But in this conversation, and what I've experienced in groups of women as they start to decloak their sexual experience in life, is that there's more to this story. And that's the point I'm trying to get to today, is that what I see mirrored outside of me in magazines, in podcasts, on TV shows and radio stations and movies and advertisements is not the whole story. It is but one piece of it. And as we are all struggling to find our way in this really chaotic and confusing world right now, I think that the spiritual, sensual, magical conversation is timely, especially as women. one of my observations in my own world, and I see in other people now, that I recognize it in myself, is my hypersexuality. I used to think that who I spread my legs for, when, and how often was my source of power. In an experience of a lifetime where I was sexually abused on more than one occasion, it became clear to me that that was something that men sought. And so I used it to my advantage. I didn't have a ton of partners, but the partners I did have, my sexualness became something that I used to soothe myself and soothe others. And it wasn't because it was deeply meaningful for me. It was a physical, mechanical way to appease the other and something inside of myself. Feminism somehow is tied up in this for me. There's this sexual revolution tied with feminism. And feminism, while components of it deeply resonate, there's other ones that I think are backwards and patriarchal, which is the opposite, I think, of what feminism tries to get across or tries to experience. And that is that, yes, I have ultimate, complete autonomy over my body, and nobody gets to tell me what and where and when and how and with who to use it, if ever. I get that, and that's important. But if I look at the whole picture, I am more than my device. I am more than my body. I am my thoughts and my ideas and the essence that animates this. I am the force of innocence. I am the force of all kinds of things. And that is a whole and complete picture. So if I'm only using my sexual prowess as a way to gain what I want in this world, that goes against and flies in the face of true feminism, true honoring of the sacred feminine. And sacred feminine is sensual. The sacred feminine that I know for myself moves and gyrates and undulates and creates life, creates art, creates music. It does that unapologetically and in a flow and in a movement that is perceived as a threat in some ages and stages and places of life. And so the magical, sensual, spiritual conversation for me is moving beyond that, coming to know myself as the force that I am, and not saying a big fuck you, I'm going to screw whoever I want, but rather defining and redefining who I am if I take into account my spiritual connection to myself and the divine. When I begin to know myself as the divine, as the God force in my own world, how does that affect my tissue? Do I get pulses and circulation and throbbing in places that typically could only be experienced in the presence of another? My magical self, when I tap into this connected state, when I'm in nature and I see the miracles before me, I get tingly and excited and teary and loving and have a deep, deep rig for all around me. That is too part of who I am. My sensuality was squished, squashed, tamped down, and shoved into a box when I was very young. It was clearly not allowed. And it's come out of my own mouth in relation to my own daughter, a time or 7. As she's been growing, don't wear that 2-piece bathing suit. The men are going to leer at you. You're just asking for trouble. Cover up your belly button ring. Why do you have a belly button ring? You're just looking for something that you don't understand you're going to get. And all of that is based in trauma and experience of violent and rape culture towards women. And here I am telling her to make herself less, to tamp down her own sensuality, and perhaps even her connected spirituality in some ways, for the sake of not attracting the wrong attention. So I don't know what the answers are. I don't know. I definitely know that what's right for me is not right for you. But I want to start the conversation. I want to invite the conversation. And sometimes it starts with, what has your experience been? What is the truth of your spiritual, sensual, sexual, magical experience as a human, as a woman, as a partner, as a mother? Because again, it changes when we have children. And can we hold the invitation and the intention large enough to allow us to gently invite that which has driven our bus, so to speak? I am not dumb. I know that our spiritual, sensual, sexual, magical selves as women has come with a boatload of violence and violation and hurt and sexual exploitation, both as children, as young women, and as adults. I very, very rarely, if ever, have met a woman who has not experienced those types of violations in their life, and they're scary, and they've really informed who we've become. But if we hold gentle, loving, trust, and sacred space for that to emerge, and we remember that we're quantum biological beings and that our devices, our bodies are made to digest and break down what we call feelings and emotions, and we do that in safe space, what is possible? I spoke to a dear friend of mine last week, and she shared some of her personal sexual experience in her lifetime and her first experiences. And I was reminded at how our first experiences, and my daughter is going through this dialogue for herself right now about should she, shouldn't she. And so it's very fresh in my experience right now, in my memory of the first times I allowed another to touch my body, and the first times I touched my own body, the first times I felt tingling and sensuality and a deep yearning and desire to move my body in ways that maybe weren't accepted. And what I am remembering and what I realized today in this 41-year-old body is that those moments, those first moments, are so impressionable. They dictate our view of the world going forward. They dictate how we move our bodies and with who and where, when and why and how. They dictate whether or not we lock up and shut down and throw away the key. They dictate whether or not we allow another to be completely complacent and not respect our temples of our body and our essence and our souls. We do that. And our first experiences are what teaches us that. So in this 10-week experience, 2 sessions, 5 weeks apiece, with a little bit of a break in between, because this is the ooey gooey of our lives. This is where we get our lives back. As we begin to discover our sensual, spiritual, magical selves, the invitation is to soften and challenge your thoughts and your current ideas and where did they come from. And yes, it's going to evoke some really, potent and powerful thoughts and ideas and memories. But know that you are in the good company of women who know that their lives are about them and your lives are about you. And they see through the strategies, they see through the comments, they see through the silence, the tears, the anger, the pissed offness, all of that. This series is unlike any other conversation I have ever had in my life and experience. So what we're going to do is we're going to weave in and invite women from our community who have gifts that evoke that sensual, magical, spiritual parts of our body, parts of our lives, the different dimensions to play in. So over the course of 2 sessions, 5 weeks apiece, you can take them independently, you can do all 10 weeks, you can take individual classes, but every class will be the format of an experience, a skill, some knowledge sharing, and then we will have a check-in and a check-out and some spacious time to wander around about what's moving. And as we engage each 5-week series, there is inevitably going to be a connection with your real life, real time. There has to be. That's the point of it all. And as your life shifts and changes and it becomes easier and you discover your own flow, you will be able to come back each Friday and join us and share with us how the week has been for you. You'll have an online community as a private Facebook page for those who are engaging in this experience. And you'll be able to check in with us. So you can have personal one-on-one time with Bobbi and I. So it's a big leap. I understand that. And if you want to connect with us a little bit more to find out if this is where you need to be in the conversation you want to have, I can't promise it'll be easy, but I can promise it's going to evoke all kinds of amazing and magical things inside of you. You'll get to discover that beautiful flow that you are. So as I said, each week will be designed with a new presenter, a new collaborator. We're going to have yoga, chakra dance, breath work. We're going to have art and music, Reiki, healing, all kinds of different modalities used and designed to evoke that which has been shut down in us for a long time. Each modality is going to be used to evoke a wholeness that we've never known until now. So I invite you to connect with Bobbi or I. You can go to the Goddess Inc. page or Soulfully Soil page or soulfullysoil.ca. And let's see where this takes us, ladies. This is a big conversation. This is a big shift for me in my own world, and I look forward to those who hear the call to play. Mahalo.